has just launched their new line of GPUs dubbed Blackwell, also known as the RTX 50 series. Today we are taking a look at the hash rates for the NVIDIA RTX 5080. This particular model is the Asus Tough Edition, which comes in at a pricier $1,350 over the reference price of $999. However, beggars cannot be choosers, and my options were this or a Zocrap after waiting overnight in line at Micro Center. It features 10,752 CUDA cores that can reach a clock speed of well over 3,000 megahertz in my experience, which is quite a bit higher than the RTX 4080. On the memory side of things, it features 16 gigabytes of GDDR7 clocked at 30 gigabits per second on a 256-bit bus, which results in a bandwidth of 960 gigabytes a second. This can be increased to over 1 terabyte a second with overclocking. This is the first mainline GPU to be released with GDDR7, and I was extremely excited to get to play with it. Powering the GPU is a single 16-pin ATX 3.0 power adapter, which can deliver well over 350 watts to the GPU with a recommended power supply of 850 watts. The thermal design power is 360 watts. Unfortunately, Ingredia has never given us a total board power specification, and using TDP always underrepresents true power consumption. For testing, I utilized the Thermaltake HCG 1000 watt power supply, and at these loads it provides 87% efficiency. Keep this in mind as all power is calculated at the wall. An additional note is that I used the 3x8 PCIe power adapters to a single 16-pin power adapter to power the GPU. To be clear, the riser and the card are powered by a separate PSU from the rest of the system for accurate readings. I've recently upgraded the risers to Oculink for more lanes, resulting in more bandwidth, so I can test things like Warthog at full bandwidth. Unfortunately, this GPU does not have support for mining Warthog quite yet. Cooling the card are 3 dual-bearing axial fans over an oversized vapor chamber in a vented exoskeleton configuration. This 3.65 slot design is an iteration on the RTX 4080 Tough Edition and really does not add much in the way of new exciting cooling features. For testing, I stuck with Tiny11 and the latest NVIDIA drivers to reduce time to market with hash rate review videos. Now that we have that overview out of the way, let's discuss stock hash rates. There is currently a single supported miner, with SRB Miner adding support 2 days ago. LOL Miner works on some algorithms, but nothing unique, and no hash rate improvements over SRB Miner. Therefore, all hash rates are using SRB Miner. As more support is added, stay subscribed with the notification bell on to learn more. On Asterisk Hash, which is a core-intensive algorithm, the RTX 4080 made 908 megahash a second at 208 watts, resulting in 4.4 megahash a second per watt. For Autolicos V2, the RTX 5080 came out swinging at 271 megahash a second at 210 watts, resulting in 1.3 megahash a second per watt, outperforming all previous gen non-HBM GPUs. I did go ahead and test CryptoNight GPU, where the 5080 was mining at 8,677 hash a second at 385 watts for an efficiency of 22.3 hash a second per watt. For reference, the 3090 Ti gets just under 5,500 hash a second. A new algorithm, Cryptix Hash, recently was added to SRB Miner. It is another kaspa fork, so is core intensive. The RTX 5080 got 1,016 megahash a second at 291 watts for an efficiency of 3.5 megahash a second per watt. Decred is pretty useless to mine these days thanks to anti-decentralization practices. However, I went ahead and tested it anyways. The RTX 5080 was mining at 23 gigahash a second at 272 watts for an efficiency of 0.8 gigahash a second per watt. ETC hash was another impressive result. The RTX 5080 got 113 megahash a second at 272 watts, resulting in a 0.4 megahash a second per watt result, which at the wall is still a coveted hash per watt. ET hash and ET hash B3 have the same results. On Kapow, which uses a bit of memory and core, the RTX 5080 is mining at 56 megahash a second at 373 watts, resulting in 0.15 megahash a second per watt. A highly demanded algorithm, lately is who-hash, which is another core-intensive algorithm. Using SRB Miner, I saw 620 megahash a second at 340 watts, resulting in 1.8 megahash a second per watt. It is pretty crazy how close in efficiency a $999 GPU is to the $230 B570 from Intel we tested last week. On Fishhash, which is another memory-intensive algorithm, SRB Miner made 74 megahash a second at 248 watts, resulting in 0.3 megahash a second per watt. I have heard reports of 90 megahash a second, but was not able to replicate that in my testing. On Carlson Hash, which is a memory-intensive algorithm, we saw 74 megahash a second at 250 watts, resulting in 0.3 megahash a second per watt. This does not come as a surprise, as it is similar to Fishhash. On Lyra 2v2, the RTX 5080 got 10.2 kilohash a second at 190 watts, resulting in 0.05 kilohash a second per watt. On Nexel Hash, which uses Core, SRB Miner is mining at 1517 megahash a second at 324 watts, resulting in 4.7 megahash a second per watt. This was a very impressive result. On SHA-256-DT, which is another core-intensive algorithm, SRB Miner is mining at 6,051 megahash a second at 279 watts, resulting in 21.6 megahash a second per watt. It's pretty clear the 5080 loves core-intensive algorithms for at least max hash rate. On Heavy Hash, the RTX 5080 was mining at 1545 megahash a second at 305 watts for an efficiency of 5 megahash a second per watt. On PhiHash, which is another core-intensive algorithm, the 5080 achieved 57 megahash a second at 372 watts, resulting in 0.15 megahash a second per watt. On VertHash, which uses core and memory, SRB Miner achieved 2,092 kilohash a second at 205 watts, resulting in a crazy 10 kilohash a second per watt. Basically 4090 performance with no overclocks. On WallaHash, the 5080 was mining 2.2 gigahash a second at 304 watts for an efficiency of 0.007 gigahash a second per watt. LOL Miner supported a couple more algos unsupported by SRB Miner. On Cuckoo Cycle, for example, the 5080 got 12.4 graphs a second at 277 watts, resulting in 0.04 graphs a second per watt. LOL Miner also supported Zhash, where the 5080 scored 154 solutions a second at 315 watts for an efficiency of 0.48 solutions a second per watt. Octopus was also supported on LOL Miner, where the 5080 scored 110 megahash a second at 320 watts for an efficiency of 0.34 megahash a second per watt. Lastly was another Cuckoo algo, Cortex, where the 5080 scored 4.9 graphs a second at 282 watts for an efficiency of 0.017 graphs a second per watt. Finally, on to the fun part. I did play with overclocking using MSI Afterburner. Unfortunately, locked memory clocks and voltage control were disabled. This means peak efficiency in core-intensive algorithms will not be possible as of yet. I did try LOL Miner since they released official Blackwell support, however, they did not work. Fortunately, Afterburner did allow locked clocks for the core, and I found some decent success with them. There is still a lot more testing that needs to be done here, but here are some initial thoughts. The core clock can be locked all the way down to 1700 megahertz so far, with the best efficiencies typically falling between 2000 and 2400 megahertz. The memory overclocks very well at plus 1200 megahertz in the memory offset overclock mode. Another great note is temperatures, where the memory did not cross 70 degrees Celsius while overclocked in mining Ergo overnight. The core was even cooler, staying at below 60 degrees Celsius. While the core temperatures will probably vary greatly by vendor, the memory modules appear to be staying cool from the power savings of GDDR7. This also means more longevity, especially compared to HBM memory modules. This is a great upgrade from GDDR6X, where memory temps would frequent the 100 degrees Celsius mark while mining. Finally, you can underclock the memory by 500 megahertz. However, it only resulted in a 6 watt drop at the wall. We will need more memory clock locking opportunities before moving forward with any of the core related algorithms. This does mean that the 50 series should get pretty good results with dual mining, which I am saving for another video. You can watch live testing on twitch.tv/blindrun by following the link in the description if you just can't wait. With all of that out of the way, let's discuss the results on the algorithms that gave significant results. This is the best card I've ever tested on Autolycos V2. I am aware of the HBM models performing better, however I am pleased with the results at these memory temperatures. I was able to get near HBM level performance by setting a memory offset of plus 1200 MHz and locking the core to 1700 MHz, resulting in 291 MHz a second at 173 watts at the wall, giving an efficiency of 1.68 MHz a second per watt for a 30% increase in efficiency over stock. If you compare this to Hashrate.no, it's already impressive, but if you consider the software reading they use, the RTX 5080 has an efficiency of 1.87 MHz a second per watt, which places it firmly in second place only to the CMP 170HX, which is a mining-only GPU. Compounding this with its superior temperatures and core performance, the 5080 will be a dual mining beast, but you'll have to wait for that video. I did vet all the overclocks on other memory-intensive algorithms. This paid off because ETH hash forks needed a bump in core clock to a 2100 MHz lock with the same 1200 MHz memory overclock to achieve its best efficiency of 112 MHz a second at 216 watts, giving 0.51 MHz a second per watt for a 25% increase in efficiency over stock. Once again, this is already very impressive when comparing on Hashrate.no, putting it in range with the RTX 3070. Taking into consideration software readings, it's one of the best GPUs out at 0.57 MHz a second per watt. Once you can add core offset and tuning core clocks, it should easily begin to top the efficiency charts. It's just a bummer that ET hash will be widely irrelevant for GPU miners this cycle. If it was 2016 again, it would be amazing when we were fighting for 0.4 MHz a second per watt. Fish hash was best at the same 2100 MHz core and 1200 MHz memory offset used for ET hash based algos. With these, it was mining at 74 MHz a second at 197 watts for an efficiency of 0.37 MHz a second per watt for a 25% gain in efficiency over stock. I'm not sure who, what, where, when 90 MHz a second was uttered, but I cannot achieve those results yet on LOL, SRB, or with any overclocks. This is disappointing because as of now, the 5080 is only at 3070 level efficiency. I'm certain this will get better with more support and overclocking capabilities. An interesting outlier was the Kryptonite GPU algorithm, which settled in at 2150 MHz core clock and 1200 mem offset. With these, the 5080 achieved 6,778 hash a second at 266 watts for an efficiency of 25.5 hash a second per watt. While that is impressive for an NVIDIA GPU taking into account the software readings, the 5080 is on par with the AMD 6000 series in efficiency. The only other NVIDIA GPU to do this is the A4000. Of course, we had to look at ProgPow as it is the most popular ASIC resistant algorithm to date, at least until Bitmain ruins it. That being said, I did end up only needing to bump the locked core clock a tad to 2200 MHz locked and utilize the 1200 MHz overclock on the memory. This resulted in 52 MHz a second at 275 watts for an efficiency of 0.19 MHz a second per watt at the wall, which was a 25% increase over stock. If you take into account software results, it comes in at over 0.2 MHz a second per watt. That being said, it is extremely important on ProgPow to apply both locked core and core offset for peak performance, which is not possible at this time. This is good news because it means there is a chance that the 50 series could finally have NVIDIA competing with AMD on ProgPow. Still, it's insane to me how good the RX 5700 XT is at mining Ravencoin. Finally, I did take a look at whohash for core-intensive algorithms, but without locking the memory clock down, it is a useless endeavor. The only discovery of note at this time is that cranking the core clock will not be how to get the best efficiency, and it will probably sit between that 2000 and 2400 megahertz sweet spot we discussed earlier. A big topic coming later in this week will be dual mining performance for the 5080, as it will be extremely interesting for these cards. Taking a look at overclocking performance for the NVIDIA RTX 5080, there is a lot to be excited for. With no memory clock lock and not being able to apply offset and lock on core at the same time, there is a huge potential for improvement. I would presume up to a 30% increase in efficiency from here with the proper support. The story of the RTX 5080 is lacking support for mining out of the gate, but not to the extent of the Intel GPUs. Thanks to keeping similar architecture to previous generations, LOL Miner was able to work without adding any official support, and SRV Miner worked with adding support very quickly. Right now, it is a waiting game for overclocking capabilities and miner support. There are a lot of exciting potentialities ahead for the 50 series. Currently taking the spot for the best non-HBM GPU to mine Ergo, the RTX 5080 will be a force to contend with on the blockchain. Some key notes are the 5090's 512-bit bus, nearly doubling total bandwidth of the 5080. I presume it is an absolute phenom at Ergo. Compound that with the same memory configuration on the 5070 Ti, and the 5080 probably won't even be the best option for mining out of Blackwell. If you think Ergo is going to the moon, the RTX 5080 makes sense. Taking a look at dual mining and overclocking in the near future, we will definitely have a lot to discuss in the coming week. That being said, waiting for support is not a bad idea, not that you have a choice with the lack of availability. Overall, I think the FUD surrounding this release is unwarranted. There is a clear generational leap for GPUs in mining coming now. The question is, will it matter? Stay tuned on the channel to know if GPU mining will be worth it this cycle or not, and I will see you next Tuesday. If you're interested in more content, be sure to check it out up here. Of course, you don't forget to hit that sub button and click that bell so you're notified when I make a video. To support me directly, head on over to sonofatech.locals.com, as I don't take any sponsorships or run any pre-rolls, and that is how I like to run my channel, supported by the community, so I don't have to worry about having any bias formed from any payments from any companies.